Hi and welcome back. In this video we're going to be starting with the front end of our program. The first thing to do is to go into the source folder and create a new directory and call it templates. It should ideally have this name, as this is the default name in Flask. So if you use the templates name, then you won't have to change anything in your application. Then go into it again, into the source folder, and create another directory called static. Inside this static folder, create more directories, one called CSS, one called JS, and one called assets. Okay, so if you've done any sort of web development before, you'll know that CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, JS stands for JavaScript, and the assets are simply going to be images and font and things like that that our website may or may not require. So a cascading style sheet, or CSS, is simply used to give your website a styling. So for example, you can change the size of fonts or the color of backgrounds, or you can put images in backgrounds or add borders to things and things like that. So all sorts of styling related info goes in CSS files. JavaScript is a client-side scripting language. So what I mean with client-side is JavaScript does not run where your application runs. It runs in the user's browser. So when the user presses a button, for example, JavaScript may do something like show an alert, show a small window, or change the color of something on the website, or anything really. But the key feature of JavaScript is that it runs in the user's browser and not on your server. And that is interesting because it reduces the load on your server. Your server has to do fewer things because JavaScript is doing some of them. But also it means that you depend on the user having JavaScript enabled. And also there are some security restrictions when using JavaScript, and we will look at those throughout the course. Finally, your assets, as I said, are just images and fonts. The templates folder are going to be your HTML files. And HTML is hypertext markup language. And essentially, HTML file describes the structure of your website. So we've looked at XML before, very quickly of course, and we agreed, well I agreed, that XML was used to define the structure of some data. So for example, we could define that we had a set of students and then the names of each of the students. HTML is actually very similar. You can define what type of thing is on your website. So for example, some text or some images or some links, things like that. So HTML defines the way your site is structured. CSS defines the way it is displayed. And JavaScript adds some interaction with the user. Okay, so the first thing to do is going to be create a new template and go into new HTML file and call it base. This base.html file is actually going to be essentially describing the layout of the page. All of our other pages are going to live inside this base.html page. So what we're going to do in the next video is define the header, the title of your page, and the footer, and then we're going to say where are the other pages going to live inside this one. So that may sound a bit confusing, but worry not, it's actually really simple, and we're going to get into it in the very next video. So I'll see you there.